Before we get started on our chandelier journey, I'd like to show you the final piece, in situ. This is the room in the doll's house which these particular chandeliers are going to sit, and this is where they live. As you can see, the room is almost fully furnished, and remember what I told you about generic furniture. See if you can spot the generic furniture in this room. So, these are the chandeliers, and as you can see, there's a special feature about these where you can actually hot plug them. You can remove them and put them back in. They plug in and plug out. And that's essential in my situation because I have kids that like to rip these chandeliers out of the house. They're very inquisitive children, so I had to design this in a way that preserved the part. It also functions as a kind of maintenance helper. I can take these out at any time to modify them or maintain them or give them another coat of metal or paint or repair a burnt LED. So being able to remove them easily, I think, is a very good feature. And the glass funnels, of course, you can see that they're not actually glass, and you can see that that's an LED. But I think the effect, when it's in situ on the wall, is quite nice. It's quite convincing. So there's our basis for what we're going to do. And now we're going to start doing it. So the first thing I did was found a bit of old copper pipe in the garden. So the copper pipe, I think, is 8mm thickness, and I cut it in half, about 20mm. So that's what you're seeing there is half a pipe cut in half and 20mm deep with some holes drilled into it in roughly the right places. So I'm dipping the smaller copper pipe, the 2mm copper pipe, into the flux, and I'm balancing it on the hole there. Now the reason that stuff that looks like butter isn't butter, it's called soldering flux. This particular kind of soldering flux is a paste which you can buy at any hardware store. And it helps the solder that we're going to be using in a minute. It helps the solder flow into the joints. You can definitely use solder without this, but it's much easier with it. The type of solder that I'm using is just normal standard electrical solder, but I'm not going to be using a soldering iron. So I'm cutting a tiny piece of solder off, and I'm carefully balancing it on that solder joint, on the joint where we want that to flow into. And this next step, as you can see, I've got my creme brulee lighter there. I'm just going to heat up the part, heat up the solder, and as you can see, it kind of pops and flows right into the joint where the flux is. And there we are. It's as easy as that. It can be a little bit hot, so be careful with this. But it does cool down quite quickly. And here's one I've prepared earlier. As you can see, I've covered it in solder flux. This stuff can be a little bit corrosive, so it's a good idea to give this a little bit of a wash after you've soldered it. But all I'm doing, as you can see, I'm just repeating the same process again, cutting a little piece of solder, gently placing it onto the area where I think I might need the melt. And it's very fiddly. It can be really tricky to get this to go where you want it to go. So you do need some patience. But it's very satisfying work. It's satisfying to see that melt into place. It's very enjoyable. Luckily, it kind of sticks to the flux. It kind of acts like a kind of glue in a way. And there you go. You can see it melt and then flow into the joint. So it's a lot easier than soldering. We want to be careful, of course, because this is micro bore pipe, and we want to make sure that the solder doesn't fill the hole in the pipe. So it's a good idea to fill that hole, or fill the pipe with a little bit of wood or something, just in case. It's okay, of course, if it protrudes further than the metal that you're soldering. You can always cut it back, but always be aware of the hole, because once you fill this with solder, once the pipe gets filled with solder, it's going to be a real pain to drill that out. So this little piece that I'm putting in now, this is the basis for the holding mechanism onto the wall. So it's basically a male and female part, and then an electrical connector at the top end. If we just had one there, what we would find is that the chandeliers could perhaps twist and swivel, and we don't want that, so we need something to keep it in the right kind of location. And of course, on the wall, what you find is that it's just a dug out kind of hole, a drilled out hole or a carved out hole on the wall with a bit of car body filler to hold the actual electrical connector in place. And it can be tricky to do, but it's in this case it's really worked quite well. As you can see that the shape of this is forming already. So we've got our arms, we've got our base. Now this is the bit where I haven't got any actual video of the actual thing. So this is a simulation. So this is what I did. I put the chandelier into a little 3D printed former, and then while it was in there, I bent the chandelier arm down, and that's what keeps the shape. That's what helps form the shape. Now, I don't like doing it this way, because later on I'll show you a different way, but this was the first attempt. It works, but it's not so great, and once we've bent the arms down, we need to bend them a different way. So I put them into this other former upside down and bend the arms into that direction. As usual, if you want these parts, they're freely available to download. The link should be underneath, and you should be able to just download them for free and print them out. These aren't so easy to make in wood. Obviously, you're going to need a lathe or something. So, if you didn't want to 3D print them, but they are basic shapes. I mean, you can make do with other things. It doesn't have to be made like this. But that's basically how I did this. As you can see, this is a factory piece, and this was a factory piece, and you can probably understand now why I needed the chandelier to be pluggable. Kids for you. And this is an older version of a chandelier that I made a long time ago, which has been crushed. So having things that can be pulled off is easier in the long run, I think, because even if the chandelier disappears, at least there's no mess left. And I'm slowly getting there. So this room looks kind of lovely. It's on its way. It's not finished yet. I don't know if it'll ever be finished at this rate, but we're getting there. And I hope some of these things inspired you. I hope you think that it was worth it. And if you want to see more of this, then I will show you later how to make those plastic glass funnels. And it's actually easier than you think. So it's there's a bit of work to do on this. So stick with the video series and hopefully we'll go through the doll's house renovating these lights.